Hey, hey, hey. Welcome to episode 126 of the Live Your Fuck Yes Life podcast. I'm Amanda Catherine Loy, and today it's just you and me. So pull up a cup of coffee or tea or wine or tequila, wherever you are, because we're getting into the nitty gritty of some kind of personal, and by kind of, I mean pretty personal, heartbreak and relationship dynamics that I have been experiencing as of late. And, I originally had a different plan for this week's episode. But after my episode went live last week with the incredible Gabrielle Stone, which if you haven't listened to that episode, highly, highly recommend you go back. And we talked about so much about heartbreak and grief and relationship dynamics. It really got me thinking about my own experiences last year and how much my experiences with heartbreak have taught me so much about myself. And something I think we don't talk about enough is how relationship dynamics shifting can really deeply impact us in ways we don't really even fully grasp until we can look back 6 months, a year later, and see all of the different stones along the pebble stones or the stepping stones along the path to get us to the end of the river of where we are now. And I personally have gone through one of the hardest years of my life when it comes to relationships, and maybe you can relate. I think the pandemic has really created a whole different foundation for how relationships go and what we are able to give from a mental health standpoint, from a capacity standpoint. And we talked so much in this last episode about heartbreak from a romantic standpoint, endings of long-term relationships like her ending and getting a divorce with her ex-husband and the affair that took place and how she navigated the heartbreak of that. And then followed up by this like whirlwind lover of hers and the heartbreak of that not working. And those stories are so impactful and incredible. And what it made me realize though was that, I think so often we see heartbreak and grief in terms of loss of relationship or adjustment of relationship primarily and almost exclusively in the context of intimate partners. And, a lot of what I talk about on here, especially lately, has been around my journey with ethical non-monogamy and polyamory. And you would think that the last year, so much of my personal story with heartbreak and grief would have been primarily focused on, the romantic, intimate nature of that. And the reality is that's not the reality. And today I'm going to take you through my journey with heartbreak since the pandemic started and how that has gone for me. Because let me tell you, it's been a fucking ride. So in the last year and a bit, since the pandemic began, I have had what I would qualify as three of the most major, if not the most major heartbreaks of my life. Three. One of which was in a romantic capacity. The other two, which I would argue were significantly more heartbreaking and fueled with lots of layers of betrayal and pain and lack of closure, were revolved around very significant friendships in my life. And why I want to talk about this more openly today with all of you on the podcast is because I've been having a lot of conversations offline in my DMs with a lot of you talking about some things that I've shared around platonic love and around grief when those friendships evolve. And I want to share some of my stories, and I want to also share some of the things that I've learned and hopefully that you can take away and apply to your own life. Because the reality is that sometimes our biggest heartbreaks when it comes to loss of relationships or relationship shifts don't happen with our partners or our intimate lovers. They happen with our friends. And for whatever reason, that is just not seen as significant. And as you all know, the way that I practice polyamory and have always viewed relationships is that there is no hierarchy when it comes to intimate partners versus platonic friends. Some of my closest people who will always be, my humans for life are platonic people in my life. And yes, I am polyamorous, but I believe that all relationships are significant, and that, a platonic partner can be even more significant to you in terms of time, energy, and priority than a romantic partner. And there are many people that, me talking about this, it's been very liberating for them to hear. And I get a lot of DMs being like, I thought I was really weird, but like I actually cohabitate with a platonic partner, and it's been so amazing for us. We actually ended up getting married even though we're not intimate, and it's really incredible. Or the most important relationship in my life is somebody who I view as platonic, and I tell her more than I tell my husband, all these things. And I want to fucking normalize that for a change, and also talk about the heartbreak when those relationships don't go as hoped. I turned 30 earlier this year, and the last time that I had a major heartbreak, frankly, one that like rocked my world, was, in college, my senior year of college. I lost a very close friend of mine that I thought was going to be in my life forever. And we had a really big falling out, and it broke my heart. And it still does break my heart thinking about that to this day. And I wish her nothing but the best. And since then, it's been essentially 10 years since then. And yeah, have I had friends come and go, or, certain friendships that had been really significant in a priority and energy standpoint kind of diminish? And, of course, and those are always challenging to navigate. Sometimes it can be tough to swallow when somebody who, was the person you called every single day to talk about things, maybe, you go in different paths, and they're still an important person in your life, but they don't carry the weight of significance that they once did in your life. But we also all can acknowledge that growth and evolution happens, and that, friendships ebb and flow in terms of that thing. But to have a friendship or a relationship, frankly, catastrophically, that a word? I think it is. But to have that catastrophically end isn't something really that I've navigated in a significant way until this year. This year, like I said, had my heart broken 3 times. And I'll probably get a little emotional when I talk about this today, because I'm still navigating the heartbreak of that. I've sifted through a lot of it, and I'm speaking to you on the other side of accepting the heartbreak, accepting the shift, but it still really hurts and is hard. And all 3 of them have a lot of patterns. I was not the one making the decision to exit the relationship on all 3 instances. On 2 of the instances, the 2 that were the platonic friends of mine, they were fueled with a lot of betrayal and a lot of manipulation tactics, a lot of gaslighting that really impacted not only just the end of the relationship and the loss, but also grieving what I viewed the relationship to be versus how they, at the end of our relationship, presented their perspective of the relationship while they were in duress. And it was really, really heartbreaking. The first one happened right at the beginning of the pandemic. And it was, the short of it is that I became really great friends with this human. And I actually kind of alluded to this story on my TikTok last week, if you're listening to this in real time, where I became really great friends with somebody who was also married, but they were in a monogamous marriage, unlike myself. And, he and I became really fast friends, related on so many things. I personally I don't know about you, but I find it rare to meet somebody that you not only like immediately connect with, but you also immediately feel seen by. Um, it's something that I don't take for granted. And when it happens, it's something that I really, really cherish. And that was what it was like with this person. We just clicked. At the time we were spending a lot of time together, pre-pandemic life, because of what we were doing from a work standpoint. And we just really clicked. And, from my perspective, I thought I was developing a really amazing friendship with this person. And at the time when we, were first friends, I hadn't been, well, I guess that's not true. I had come out publicly as poly on the podcast. Um, but, a lot of people in my quote unquote real life world don't necessarily know about my podcast or listen to my podcast, and aren't, on my TikTok channel, that kind of stuff. So, he did not know at the time that I was polyamorous. And one time I was going on a date with somebody, and I didn't have my car, and we were, both at our place of work. And afterwards, the location of the date was on his way home. And so I just asked if he could drop me off. It was 5 minutes in the car. And he did. And I went on this date. And, the next time we hung out, I was like, I feel like I need to tell you something. Like, we're getting close enough now that I really want to make sure that I'm being honest with you. And it felt kind of weird that like you were dropping me off and you didn't actually know where I was going last night. But, I was actually going on a date, and, he had already met my husband a bunch of times. And so I was like, it wasn't with, Kev, and I actually am poly. And, he asked some questions, and, like a couple minutes later was like, well, fuck. And I was like, what do you mean? Well, fuck. And he was like, well, this makes things really complicated for me. And I was like, I'm not sure I comprehend what you mean. Anyways, and the short of the long is that he proceeded to let me know that, he had feelings for me, pretty strong ones. And, that he felt like me sharing that I was poly kind of gave him permission to tell me that he had these feelings. And, at the time I was really surprised, taken aback, because it's not at all how I had perceived our relationship to be or how I perceived him to feel. And I also was, on one hand, I was uh, understanding, because I personally believe that, attraction to other people is really normal. And, whether we are monogamous or not, we are all going to be attracted to other people. The difference is whether we choose to act on it or not, right? From my standpoint. And a lot of people have different perspectives on what being monogamous is, on what cheating is, all of that stuff. But to me, I was like, okay, you're just, for whatever reason, feeling like it's acceptable to tell me that this is what's happening. But like, obviously we're friends, and that's all this is ever going to be. Which we both agreed on. But it was also, put me in a really strange predicament where now I knew this information, and, felt uncomfortable about that. Didn't really know how to interact in our dynamic, given his agreements in his life. And, of course, that it ended very poorly. And he, as soon as he informed his spouse that, he had these feelings, and obviously that nothing was going to ever happen, but he just wanted to be honest with her, that put a kibosh on our friendship. And it was really devastating for me. It was the first time that anything like that has ever happened. And it was really tough to be put in a situation where, I built this really incredible friendship with somebody, and felt really seen by a person for the first time in a really long time, frankly. And as soon as, the situation was revealed, I guess, because somebody couldn't keep their stuff to themselves or whatever. I don't know. It put a kibosh on our friendship. And, ultimately, I supported that choice. It was really a betrayal in the end because of the way in which, he went about ending it and the harsh words that were used with me attached to it. And it was really hurtful. And that's really what started my pandemic journey. So, not only was I grieving the changes that the world was going about and how everything was adjusting, and also grieving the loss of my entire career as an actor for the time being. But I was also navigating this heartbreak of losing, the first really solid and valuable friend that I had made in years, a true friend, Um, so that was a lot. And it ended with very little closure and with a complete kibosh on all communications. So uh yeah, it's just that was really challenging. And a lot of you that responded to my TikTok were like, the fuck. And apparently also a lot of people had had similar things happen to them. And so for all of you who might identify with that, I'm really sorry. And for those of you who are monogamous and have agreements, if somebody in your life tells you that they're poly, it does not give you the permission to then tell you that you're in love with them. Period. Like, just period. Let me just put that into the ether, because fuck that noise. It is really, really, really heartbreaking to navigate. So that was the first major heartbreak. And then fast forward a few months, and I fostered a relationship. And this time it was definitely romantic. And, I fell head over heels for this girl, with this incredible woman, who, we connected technically over Instagram, but she and I were in each other's like friend circles, and had an amazing whirlwind virtual romance for, 2 months, at, the height of this time last year, really. And it was life-changing for me on a lot of fronts. For one, she was the first woman that I'd ever really fully fallen in love with, like, for sure. Hands down. We had and have such a very beautiful and strong and unique connection. And I will forever be grateful for that experience. And what was challenging within that dynamic was that she did and does identify as monogamous and had always pictured her life in a certain way, certainly in a monogamous framework, but beyond that, living with somebody long-term, consistently, daily. And she also happens to not live in the area that I live in. She lives pretty far away. So there were a lot of things that were in our way, and we tried really hard to make that work. And at the end of the day, she knew that this wouldn't be right for her long term. And we very lovingly chose to close the romantic component of our relationship, which, broke my heart because it wasn't obviously what I wanted. But I also fully understood. And, grieving that was really tough, but it was probably the most simple grief process of the three, because it was done in such a loving way. There was no betrayal. There was no malice. It was all coming from a place of love. The term conscious uncoupling is something that's been tossed around for, 5 years now or something. And I've never really understood it before, because I've never been through an experience where that has been able to happen. I've always wanted it to happen, but my partners have not allowed for that to exist. It's always been pretty. I feel like the few relationships I've had that have ended and over the course of my poly journey have been pretty toxic in the way that they've ended. But this was just a beautiful way to close a dynamic and consciously come together and decide that it's not the right thing for us, both as individuals and as a unit. So that was the second one. And then Fast forward to the end of my 2020 when, I had a friendship that has been in my life for, a significant amount of time. Um, very, very intensely blow up for reasons that I still don't know, still don't understand, and was left with nothing, frankly, from that. It was, I attempted to repair it and repair something I didn't even know why it was broken, and was not met at all in that process. And, this is a person that I talk to every day, that I relied on a lot in my life for, support, and, they relied on me as well. And, I guess they no longer wanted to have me in their life. And, the lack of closure there, the betrayal, the just complete ghosting, frankly, was so heartbreaking, is so heartbreaking. And that all happened over the course of less than a year, all three of those experiences. And, again, two of them were from a platonic standpoint, and it rocks you, like in last week's episode, we talk about this a lot, and it's really, really resonated with me and sat with me a lot. But there is something so potent about the process of grieving a person in your life that is still here, a living, breathing person that is still around, that they're not in your life because they are choosing to exit it. They are choosing to no longer love you at the end of the day. That grief, that heartbreak is so unparalleled and is something we never talk about. And that that really, 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 at the end of the day, is why I wanted to come on here and talk to all of you, because we just don't know how to work through this stuff. We're not taught how to work through this stuff. And also how to not see anything but this massive wall of grief and sadness and anger a lot of the time. And for me, that's what it was. Like, the cycles of grief are real. It's like confusion, anger, sadness, and some layer of resolve, And I think what has allowed me to move through them with so much intention and to feel sad still, but at peace with all of these instances is, for one, a lot of the embodiment practices that I teach, and navigating that. Two, having a support system to talk through all of this with, and of course, going to therapy, which, is a weekly occurrence in my world. Navigating my embodiment techniques and actually physically moving through the process of grief instead of just holding it in your body and your cells. And actually, I think the most important thing has been attempting to find the good. This is always something that it just comes natural to me. It is how I think I was built on this earth, is to try and, always find the silver lining, the good, the lesson. And what this past year has taught me, and what these relationships have taught me, is that relationships are our biggest teachers. And I've said this a lot. It was actually the person that I fell madly in love with that I talked about earlier. She said this to me at the beginning of our relationship, and it has stuck in a way that very few things in my life do. I say it all the time to myself, and I feel it all the time because it's true. Relationships are our biggest teachers. When we are and choose to be in relationship with other people and really, really choose to form bonds with other humans, get to know them, be vulnerable with other people, build attachments at times, with other people. We, yeah, of course, learn about them, But at the end of the day, it teaches us so much more about ourselves. And that's true for relationships that are in our lives. And it's also true for those that exit them. And not only do each individual relationship teach you something, right? So that person taught you this. Like, for example, these three relationships, if I think about the things that they taught me, some of them include how to really shine my light as bright as humanly possible, um, to be kind to myself and embody empathy for myself and for others, um, how to speak my needs and ask for them, um, taught me that it is possible to fall in love with another woman, taught me, um, you know, that sometimes, even though I have done so much work on my self-worth, that sometimes I still don't see myself as the bright shining light that I have been echoed to be, and that I need to give myself more credit. I mean, the list goes on and on, right? So they've all taught me so much individually just by knowing them. Um, but also the heartbreaks, the betrayals, the circumstances have taught me so much. They've taught me about the patterns in my life, about the patterns I invite into my life, and not just invite, but many times create. They've taught me about the ways that I fall short in my self-worth and the red flags that I might see but choose to not acknowledge because I would rather just be so focused on the good. Um, they've taught me to be more discerning when it comes to forming new relationships and be less laissez-faire about the red flags. They've taught me to acknowledge when it is time to exit something, uh, because it's the right thing for me, even if I know it will hurt the other person. I mean, they've taught me so much, those endings, those heartbreaks, that grief. And yeah, we always say grief teaches us that we're strong, that we can get through anything. But what if we looked a little deeper at the lessons, right? What if we really, really unearthed what these individual endings or relationships have taught us? How we can not make the same mistakes moving forward, not continuously open ourselves to the same patterns. Because the reality is that if you notice, and you will, if you really consciously look at yourself and the relationships in your life and how those have kind of come to pass, or the endings, you're going to find patterns that emerge. You're going to see time after time, for whatever reason, I put all, like, this is a pattern of mine. For example, when I love somebody, I give my whole heart to them. I pour so much of my time and energy, and I give because I want them to feel so much love. I want them to feel the love that I feel inside of my heart for them. I want them to be so immersed in that experience. And I tend to attract people who don't give nearly as close to the same way, like not even pennies, you know? Um, and that pattern is important, right? Having that awareness of that pattern then allows me to build some clarity around why I might be attracting this into my life. And then that clarity then allows me to build action tools where I can adjust that pattern moving forward so that I can cultivate relationships with people who are capable of giving me what I actually want and need in a partnership of any kind, instead of, the things that I don't actually deserve in the long term. And that's just one example of the patterns that I've discerned for myself because of these heartbreaks, because of this pain that I've navigated in the last year. So I urge you and I encourage you to really take a look at what are those for yourself. Take some time to journal and really think about who are the people in my life that have been really important, that maybe have ended, the relationships that have ended that have really hurt my feelings. What are the patterns that are I show up within my current relationships? There's so much to be learned about yourself from the way in which you interact with your relationships. And I want to leave you with a thought that I've had running through my brain for over a decade now because of my amazing husband, who helped me really see early on that relationships are not always what you think they will be. I, as a, recovering control freak, um, you know, I've really struggled in the past, and frankly still do struggle when relationships change, when the dynamics that are, in a relationship that I love, that means so much to me, when it evolves into something different. Even if maybe that different thing is needed, that change can be really challenging for me. And whether that change is, you just don't talk as often, or maybe they're fully out of your life, at least for now, and maybe forever. He said something to me early on in our relationship that really changed my perspective on people. And it's that people come in and out of your life when they're meant to, and it's cyclical. And sometimes, the the lifespan of a connection was meant to be only a few months, and it's so meaningful and it taught you so much, and that was all it needed to be in this lifetime. And sometimes, you meet people who enter your life like a blazing fire and stay, and that fire burns until you die. Those are rare. Those don't come around very often. And when you find them, grab onto them. The reality is that more than anything, most relationships will come in to your life and maybe leave your life, and maybe they'll come back around when they're meant to, and maybe they won't. Um, but the beauty of people is that, we're ever evolving, ever changing. And if we choose to move with the tides, if we go back to my river analogy at the beginning, if we choose to move with the tides instead of fight the rapids, we're going to feel so much more peace than heartbreak. And I don't know about you, but I would so much rather choose peace at the end of the day than a constant life of heartbreak. So that's what I encourage you to do. Ride the waves and try not to swim so far upstream on those rapids. All right, that's all for this week. I didn't really talk about anything in the show notes that you'll need to check out, but I do recommend, if you are in the E&M or polyamory space, there are two different things that I am offering right now. One of those is one-on-one peer support sessions for 30 minutes or an hour. We can connect. I've met so many of you, and a lot of you are starting to do repeat sessions, and I love it. It's just so nice to, I think it's so nice for so many of you have reflected. It's so nice to talk to somebody who is polyamorous themselves and understands, and can be there to just listen and support, provide feedback, share experiences, whatever it is that you need. It's just so nice to be heard and have space held for in that space. So you can check that out on any of my socials in the link in my bio, or you can go to the show notes. And I'm also on May 13th, I'm going to be doing a community-led Zoom Q&A session on all things polyamory. You can snag your ticket on Eventbrite for that. It's going to be super fun and a great way to just, be surrounded by a community of other folks who are just like you. And it's a less, one-on-one space if that's not really your vibe and you're just really looking for a community and just hear other people's feedback, perspectives. Somebody's question will probably spark something inside of you, and you'll feel seen, heard, and also maybe get your own question answered, or a question answered that you hadn't thought of. So again, that is on all my socials, or you can check out the link in my bio and in the show notes. And yeah, until next week, I'll see you on the flip side. Bye-bye.